Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode. This episode is a little bit different to the last five that I did, where I had a 5-day microstock challenge where the aim was to make a winning microstock photo or video every time that I went out, once a day for 5 days. So if that's something of interest to you guys, check out my channel and you'll see 5 days worth of videos about going photo and video hunting. Okay, now this episode is about this beast, and that is the 400mm fixed prime lens, the Canon EF the Canon EOS 400mm F5.6 prime. The reason I bought this was I've been looking to do more wildlife photography, and the lens for my stills camera, my 70D, which I'm filming on right now, is not long enough, and that's a 70 to 200mm Sigma f2.8 IS. I did buy a 1.4 times extender, but the Sigma lens isn't really sharp enough to make full use of that. So to retain sharpness, I kept the extender off, and realistically the sharpest this lens goes to is at 135mm. At 200mm it's not really sharp at all, even at apertures like f4 to f5.6. So I was lacking a bit of range, and I didn't want to compromise this time on sharpness and quality. And the trouble I've had with the Sigma and Tamron lenses is that sometimes they forward or back focus at smaller apertures, or wider apertures I should say, and that's a real problem when you're trying to get a shot and you want it to be sharp, and for some reason it back focuses, and it can be a real pain to adjust for. So I decided to stick with Canon on this occasion, but I didn't have a big budget, but I did want to have sharpness. So I avoided the Tamron and the Sigma telezooms of 150mm to 600, because I've looked at a number of tests online and found that at 400mm this thing is a lot sharper. The only problem with it is it's all or nothing lens. It doesn't compromise because it doesn't have image stabilization. So it's very sharp, especially at high shutter speeds where you don't need a tripod to keep things steady, and you can handhold. It's very light, but in darker places and with lower shutter speeds you do need that tripod or monopod to keep things steady. So what did I pay for this lens? I paid 900 euros second hand, and I bought it from a camera store called Cormorant online. So I've been taking it out for a couple of days and going to some nearby birding areas just to give it a run for its money and to see how it's been going. It is a second-hand lens, so it's got some dust in the element, but I've been looking pretty closely in Lightroom of the photos, and they don't show up in the photos at all. So the dust is non-visible, and of course there's no dust on my sensors, so it's okay. It's a very simple lens, which is something I really like. It's got a simple autofocus and manual focus, and it's also got a distance selector for the closest focus point, and the choices are you can focus from 3.5 meters or 8.5 meters. It's also got this built-in lens hood which comes with the lens, and you just extend it and then twist it, which is really good. And it's extremely light as well. Actually, it's probably slightly heavier than my 70-200, but not by much. Maybe it's heavier because it's got that lens hood as well, and that tripod mount. So yeah, really light. So yeah, what we'll do is we'll have a look at some of the photos that I took in Lightroom and see how the lens performed. Okay, so a couple of days ago I went to a nature reserve really close to The Hague, and you pay a couple of euros to get in, but it guarantees that you pretty much have the place to yourself, especially if you go there during the midweek. Apart from other birds, the place is really full of woodpeckers, so I really wanted to target a few woodpeckers with this long lens because they're so flighty. With the 70-200 it's virtually impossible. Only problem was it was in the middle of the day, so the lighting was really bad. It's the first time I've used this lens, so it was a mixed bag of results, but I did find one woodpecker and the light wasn't as horrific as it could have been. And he's just on this branch. I think it's a young one actually, because he allowed me to get a lot closer than they normally do. This is an unedited photo, and I took it at 5.6 at 1/800th of a second. Excuse me. And ISO 160. So even though you think 1/800th of a second is pretty fast, they're twitchy little birds, so it is hard to capture the movement, or freeze the action as I should say. So zoomed into 100%, you can see that he's not sharp. I mean, if I look at, I think I did crop it. No, it's not cropped either. Yeah, so it's not sharp. There could have been a bit of motion because I was hand holding it. So, so far a mixed bag. We'll go to another one. And this one I did crop it in some. And it was taken at 320th of a second, which is really slow. ISO 100, 400mm of course. And at 100%, yeah, it's still not sharp. So total fail on the woodpeckers, I'm afraid. I have a feeling the woodpecker either moved or I wobbled a bit when I was taking the photo. So we'll move on to some cormorants that I was photographing. And this is an unedited JPEG. And see how that looks. That's pretty good. I could edit that a little bit and bring out the detail a bit more. You see a nice color on the bill despite the bad lighting. Excuse me. Yeah, you see the color on the bill there despite the bad lighting, and the detail in its feathers. It's not that sharp though. This one was at 400th of a second. So far, he is sharp. So it just means that I didn't have the focus on this one. The focus was more on that one. And at 5.6, it's pretty shallow, so there's a good chance that he was on the fringes of the focus, that one. Here we go. Terrible lighting, of course, but it gives you an idea of what the capabilities of this lens are. I think these cormorants were about 30 meters away, and just zooming in to 100%, these baby cormorants, which look really like baby pterodactyls, very ugly. They're pretty sharp. You can pick out some good detail. Oops, there's some sticks. Yeah, but you can pick out some good detail here. This is unedited, ISO 125, and it's at 1,000th of a second. And these guys were bobbing around, fighting with each other, so it was pretty hard to freeze the action. I think if I had gone up to 1,500th of a second, probably would have been even more sharper, and probably only would have gone up to about ISO 250. So that's a good result for those guys. Here's another one. A little triangle of action. Wait for the video to render. Yeah, that's not too bad. That one's at 2,000th of a second and ISO 250th. So that's what I did for the next one. Yeah, that's pretty good detail. I think I could edit that into something if the light was any way half decent, which it isn't. But it's a nice composition, to these two facing each other and this one looking on. Monsters that they are. Okay. This shows you the real limitations of this lens. I was hand holding for this one, and it was in the shade. I won't say it was getting dark, but it was in the shade. And so the shutter speed was lower, 6/40th, but the real problem is the ISO is 1000. And these crop body sensors like the 70D or 7D Mark II or 80D, they really don't handle ISO that well, and this is the result. The noise has made this image really soft. I think there's also a little bit of motion blur even at 640th of a second, because the feathers, yeah, especially down here, it looks like the bird is moving or I am. Yeah, this is unedited, but it's not cropped either. And this is the edited version. So I've taken a bit of the noise out. That's quite a hefty noise reduction, 32, and it hasn't improved the image that much, and the sharpness hasn't either. So yeah, I would consider this photo a complete write-off. So it just shows you the limitations with this kind of body. I think the 400 prime really belongs on a full body, full frame body, such as a 5D Mark IV or a 5D Mark III or a 5D Mark II. One that can handle the noise better. I mean, this is only 1000. Yeah, and it's not good. Okay, next photo. I tried my hand at a little bit of landscape photos with the city skyline of The Hague, and it just goes you to show, even on a tripod with a fairly sharp aperture of 7.1, an ISO of 100, 1/100th of a second. If there's a lot of dust and atmosphere or moisture in the atmosphere, then you're not going to get sharp shots. And that's exactly what was happening here. The sun was very low, so it was highlighting all of the moisture and the dust or the pollution in the atmosphere. and the result is a very soft photo. So even with a 400mm, getting those really tight skyline shots, you have to be choosing a day where the atmosphere cooperates with you. Okay, another one, I just wanted to highlight the limitations, and this is an extreme version. I was hand holding for this shot at 1/40th of a second, ISO 100, and you know, 1/40th of a second with an unstabilized 400mm is pretty unrealistic to expect any kind of happy result. And if I zoom in, that's exactly what I got, really unsharp and wobbly. And another one, normally if the atmosphere is good, this would have turned out really sharp. It was sunset on the coast, and this is a Coast Guard vessel, and as you can see, it's not very sharp. That was shot at 25/100th of a second, so it's not soft because of the movement. It would have frozen the motion of the boat, but it is soft or blurry or ghosty because of that atmosphere. It's just so thick. Okay, into some more wildlife now, and we found this European stork, and we took a number of photos of the stork, and I just wanted to show this one and check out the sharpness. This is an unedited JPEG like most of the others, and 1250th of a second, handheld, ISO 100. It's okay, but it's not super sharp. We'll try this one. Wait for the image to render, and that's more like it. That is pretty sharp. You can see good detail in the feathers. Oops. So really sharp, and I may have just missed the focus on the eye and got it more in the head behind the eye, but I'm really happy with that. Go to another one. Looks like the focus on the eye, no, looks like I missed focus on the eye as well there. Well, we'll try another one. And this one's of a couple on a nest, and they have a young stork. These are unedited, 1,000th of a second, ISO 100. Look at another one. The baby stork there, looking a bit cuter than the cormorants, that's for sure. I think I had the focus on the adults though. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that as an unedited photo. That looks pretty sharp. And now moving on to a reed warbler, I think. If you guys know what kind of bird this is, then feel free to tell me, because I'm not 100% sure. It's got some nice detail in the feathers there. Shot at 1250th of a second, ISO 100, always 5.6. Well, that's the minimum or maximum aperture. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then I got some birds in flight. And this was a black-headed gull, shot at 1/800th of a second, and I'm pretty sure that 1/800th of a second is too slow because he's not very sharp. So I needed to bump up my shutter speed there, and this one was 1/2000th of a second, at ISO 160, another black-headed gull. But as you can see, I think I totally missed focus on this one because it's out of focus. Looks like I need some practice with this lens. Well, I hope you liked the sample shots of the first couple of days that I've used this beast, and I'll be getting more practice with it in the coming weeks because I need to get some practice, and I'll look forward to showing you guys the results. Anyway, I hope to see you again next week. Have a good one up until then, and take it easy. All the best.